Hello my friend, in this video I'm going to give you a guided tour through the Spotify for Artists app and dashboard. I'll show you around and explain what things are and how everything works. Spotify for Artists is a service created by Spotify to help artists keep track of their stats, promote their music, and control their overall presence on Spotify. So although Spotify for Artists can sound great on paper, it can be a little unclear exactly what it can and can't do for you. It can also be a little unclear of how exactly you can get access to it. So let's clear all that up right now. But before I continue, I also wanted to let you know that I've written an article on this topic as well. So if you'd like to follow along, or if you simply prefer the written word format, simply Google Best Friends Club Spotify for Artists. Spotify for Artists can get you a snapshot of your Spotify artist stats, both how your overall artist profile is doing and how your individual songs are doing. It allows you to update your profile picture, biography, links, and featured playlists. It allows you to submit your music for editorial playlist consideration. It also allows you to access the Spotify for Artists dashboard on the web, on iOS and Android devices. It also can help you guarantee the placement of your new releases on your Spotify followers' weekly release radar playlists, and it gets you access to new features like Canvas and Wrapped. On the opposite end of things, here's what Spotify for Artists can't do for you. It can't get an extremely detailed look at your Spotify stats and how your music is doing in the eyes of the algorithm. It does not allow you to submit your music to non-Spotify playlists. It does not let you upload your music directly to Spotify. It does not give you the ability to run Spotify ads yet, and it does not give you access to a Spotify representative, although it does give you access to a Spotify chat where you can submit tickets to Spotify. So to actually get access to the Spotify for Artists dashboard and become a verified Spotify artist with that blue check mark, there are two ways that you can do this. After getting your music submitted to Spotify, if your distributor has the ability to in their backend, such as DistroKid, TuneCore, and CD Baby, there is a way in the backend of those distributors to simply click a few buttons and get immediate access. However, you can also do this by claiming your artist profile on a Spotify for Artists webpage. However, this way is actually a little bit slower and is not recommended. It's a lot more work. However, for a deep dive on how to do any of these methods, I'll link a video to that up above. But with that said, let's now kick off the guided tour of the Spotify for Artists dashboard. So now that I'm in mini mode down over here, you can see this is what the Spotify for Artists dashboard looks like once you've been logged in. There's a couple ways to log in. You can do it with Facebook or anything like that, and you do need to have a Spotify account to be able to log into this. But once you're in, this is what the homepage looks like. One of the most important features, in my opinion, at the top left is the people listening now feature, which will actually show you how many people are listening at this point in time. And this can be useful if you're running any kind of marketing efforts towards pushing your songs. You can see roughly if your songs are doing well. It also gives you an indication if you may have been added to a good playlist, like the Release Radar algorithmic playlist, or maybe even a nice juicy editorial playlist. Don't get too caught up in looking at this too much. It can make you feel good or bad, and it's not a good thing to have any kind of numbers like this have power over you, but it is a good way at a glance to see how your music is performing. And that's kind of the overall theme of this whole page here. So we're going to ignore this middle section for now, but over on the right, at a glance, you can see how you've been performing over the last 7 days. So it gives you an idea of how many listeners, streams, and followers you have and whether that number has been going up or down. It also shows your top songs over the last 7 days in order of which one is performing the best. And it also shows you the top playlists that you've been on. Right now, I'm lucky enough to have my top playlist be all editorial playlists. I don't think that'll last forever, but I am quite happy about that. Other than that, on this webpage, there is this section in the middle, which is basically just a bunch of junk from Spotify. Most of it's not usually that useful, to be completely honest. Like over here, they're trying to sell you on hiring designers for the Canvas, and they'll show you some news and things that are changing over time. One thing that could be useful is usually in the first place, they will show some kind of stat about what's going on in your profile. So right now it's letting me know that my artist pick is about to expire, even though I set my artist pick not too long ago. So sometimes this isn't that accurate, and usually it's just going to say something like, oh, you have a new release coming up, you should update your profile picture. But also it'll let you know when a new song has been ingested in the platform and that you can pitch it to the editors, and then once you've pitched it, it'll let you know that the pitch has gone through. So it can be useful, but generally So moving on to the music tab. The music tab has quite a bit of information here on all of your releases. By default, it is going to show you how your songs are doing in the last 28 days, and it shows you the amount of streams, the amount of listeners, the amount of views, which is the amount of Canvas views, and the amount of saves, as well as when the song was first added. You can actually toggle different time zones, such as the last 24 hours, which can be quite useful, as well as since 2015, which is generally all time. If you do the all time, I noticed that it won't show you listeners, views, or saves. So in my opinion, if you want to see kind of a full picture of how everything's doing, you're going to want to click since 2015, and then it'll show you everything. So literally show you every single song in terms of how popular it is. And you can also export all this data as a CSV file if you need to. There's a search box, which could be useful. I don't really use that. Moving on, there's also tabs within the music section that could be useful as well. So when you move over to releases, this will actually show all of your releases in chronological order, or yeah, in chronological order, as opposed to in terms of which is more popular or has the most stats. Again, you can change things between 24 hours, 7 days, 28 days, and since 2015. Also, I should mention that by clicking the streams, listeners, views, or save section, you can actually toggle whether you'd want this list to show by most streams or least streams, most listeners or least listeners, etc, etc, etc. So then moving on to the playlist tab. Playlist tab is actually quite useful. Again, it has the same time selector, and it'll start off by showing you all of the algorithmic playlists that you've been on for that time period, which is incredibly useful. You can always press show all, and it'll show some of the extra ones as well. Then moving forward, it'll show you the editorial playlists that you've been on. This is extremely useful, and you can click show all to show all of them. Again, I've been lucky enough to get on 13 Spotify editorial playlists, which is really cool, and I'll link a video to that explains a little bit of how I did that in the top section above. And then finally, moving on, you can see the listener playlist. So these are playlists that are made by Spotify users, and this could be anything from like bigger Spotify accounts as well as just everyday listeners. So right here at the top, you can see I've created my own playlist, which is doing the best for me right now. And then moving beyond that, you can see that I have a couple songs added into a playlist from a label called Fresh Goodies. And then from there, it's a combination of Spotify users, promotion companies, and all sorts of different things. I also was lucky enough to get a playlist added from Martin Garrix at one point. And then usually the further down you go, then you'll see a little bit more of everyday listeners. I honestly think this is a little bit cooler than some of the more company-based or label-based playlists, because this shows you the playlist ads from everyday users, and these are the people that are genuinely listening to your music a lot and really like what you're doing. And if you ever need to see kind of the total amount, you have to scroll all the way down, and you can see that I've been added to about 6,300 playlists. And right now it's showing 100 of them. Also, from the music tab, whether you're on songs or releases, you can actually click into each song, and it'll actually show you a lot of stats and information for this individual song. So at the top of the song, it'll show you the all-time streams, so how many streams it's gotten from all time. And then similar to as you'll see on the audience tab shortly, you can get a graph of how this song has been doing for a different amount of time frames. You can do the last 7 days, last 28 days, the last 12 months, and you also have the ability to do a custom time frame here as well. So as you can see, this is kind of how the song has been performing in the last 12 months, and in the last 7 days, this is how it's been performing as well. Moving down, you can actually see the source of streams for this song on an individual basis. So just for this song, you can see the breakdown of where the streams are coming from. This song, again, has been lucky enough to get in an editorial playlist, so it has about 95% of streams coming from Spotify editorial playlists. But if I back out to the music tab and click something that isn't on an editorial playlist, like this one, see, this is probably a little bit more similar to what you'll see, a little bit more of a balanced breakdown across the board with no editorial playlists and everything else being distributed between my actual profile and catalog, actual listeners playlists and their library, other listener playlists, Spotify's algorithmic playlist, which is a great one to be watching out for, and other, which is streams that come from smart speakers, TVs, or wearables. And actually, if you hover over each one of these things, it'll tell you a little bit more about what these individual stream sources are. And then as you move down, you can see a country comparisons tab, where you can pick 3 countries, and it'll show you kind of how your song is performing in those locations throughout the time zone that you've selected here. And you can actually break it down by individual year, as well as the last 7 days and the last 28 days. And moving down, you can see the top countries that you have streams for this song. And moving down, you get a little bit more of a breakdown of which cities are streaming this song the most. And both of these are for the last 28 days. One last thing about this individual song tab, by default you start on the stats mini tab, but you can also click over to playlists, and this is super cool. You can also see a breakdown of what playlist this song has been added to, and you can select, say, the last since 2015 to kind of give a since the beginning of time breakdown. And then you could see this song in particular has been added to 698 playlists, and you can see which playlists are kind of performing the best. And this could be useful for a couple of reasons. One, to see if you get a playlist ad that you have asked for or whatever, you can see if you're actually getting streams from that playlist. And it's also a cool way to see, like, okay, like Benjamin here added this song to his playlist and it's gotten 4,000 streams. So when I first started seeing this, I reached out to him and thanked him. And like, that's a cool thing that you can do because you have the ability to see the playlist your song gets added to. And actually, one last thing is when you're in the song tab, you can click add canvas, and this is how you can actually add one of those canvases. It gives you all the information you need to do it right here, and then you simply click this to upload the actual file, and you can get going with that. And then finally, you can click the upcoming tab, and this will show you when you have any unreleased music that you've sent over from DistroKid or your distributor. It'll then show up here, and this is where you can do a playlist pitch. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about how to do a successful playlist pitch and actually get on some editorial playlists and get the attention of the editors, I will link a video that I did where I have a few tips of how I got into the editorial playlist, and I also happened to film my run through of the pitch for a song that ended up getting on a Spotify editorial playlist as well. So link to that above. Finally, moving on to the audience tab, and the audience tab I find super duper useful actually. So again, over on the right, you have the time zones. It's a little bit less for this one. You only have 7 days, 28 days, and since 2015. But this is kind of cool because this shows you at a glance in the last month or so how many listeners you have overall and kind of how things are going, how things are trending. You can also see the same thing with streams as well as followers, which is super cool. And then this is more of a new feature actually, but they've added the ability to have the default listener streams and followers show you the worldwide stats, but you can actually drill into any of these countries and see kind of how you're doing over here. Right now you can see I have 2 listeners in Benin, and I've had 8 streams from Benin, wherever that is, which is kind of cool. Moving forward from that, you can actually compare yourself to other artists. This could be useful for a bunch of reasons. Maybe you're trying to decide if you want to do a collab with someone, and you can see kind of how they're doing compared to how you're doing. It'll show your graph compared to their graph. It used to be a little bit more tactile, where like if you hover at the end, you can see that I've had on Friday, April 16th, I had 12,600 streams, and you used to be able to hover over the other persons and see exactly what they got, but they've since removed that feature. So it's still useful to compare, but it's not as useful as it used to be, unfortunately. When you scroll down this page, you'll also be able to see the source of your streams from the last 28 days and worldwide. You can't adjust this particular metric, unfortunately. And right now, I'm lucky enough to have quite a few songs in Spotify editorial playlists. And generally, when that happens, it's going to dominate what's going on in the back end for you. So right now, I have 90% of my streams coming from editorial playlists. It's a good and bad thing, in my opinion, because I'm kind of at the mercy of these editorial playlists. Once my songs eventually phase out of those playlists, which I'm assuming is inevitable, then my streams will be, you know, a little bit more normal looking and not as dominated by this editorial playlist. Moving on, you can see in the last 28 days again and worldwide of the gender of the listeners that are streaming your music. And on to the right of that, you can see the listener's age in the same time group and location. Right now, you can see that most of my listeners are 28 to 44. This specifically could be useful for when you are coming up with your own marketing and maybe you're running ads. You can use this information to run ads to these genders and age, and basically everything on this page is very useful for coming up with targeting and coming up with your own marketing. So I think it's useful to check this every once in a while for sure. Also, you can see artists that your listeners also listen to. So this again could be useful for things like targeting Facebook and Instagram ads, as well as potentially finding people to reach out to have collaborations. And then finally, moving down, you can see where your music has been streamed in the last 28 days around the world. Again, it could be useful for stuff like figuring out where to tour, but honestly, I think it could be a little bit more useful in figuring out where that you should spend your ad money running targeted ads to. And then finally, moving on to the profile tab. The profile tab is where you get to customize your Spotify profile and how you look to listeners and Spotify users. Up at the top, you're able to press this button up here and you can change the header image, which is this big background image, and as well as your avatar images, which is like your profile picture. Right on the right here, you'll see some basic tips on what kind of sizes to use. I would just go over here and figure out what and do what they tell you essentially. Then as you kind of navigate this area, it's more or less set up as how your profile actually looks in the Spotify app. So you'll see that there's a very similar tabs, but you also get the ability to set a fundraising pick, which allows you to link a fundraising destination of your choice. I ignore this. I'm not trying to raise any money or do anything like that or get any money, so I ignore it. It'll automatically show you your latest release, but you could also customize an artist pick. So here is usually where I'll put something like a playlist, and you also have the ability to add an image and write a little message to this section as well if you would like to. Scrolling down, it'll show you basically what the most popular songs are. From this point on, it's more or less what your profile actually looks like on the Spotify app. However, when you get to the bottom, there is the artist playlist section where you can actually add playlists. So the way that you do this, by the way, is you don't create a playlist from your official account. You would need to create a playlist from your normal Spotify user account, and then you can actually look it up here. So if I type in Best Friends Club, you can see that there are a couple of playlists that I created, and as you can see, Matthew Voltaggio, that's my name, and then you can pick that user's playlist. Just make sure that your playlists are public so it shows up in this section, and then you can just add it here easily. And then lastly, from this section, if you click the About tab here, you also have the ability to add additional images in the image gallery. By clicking the little pencil, you can upload images right there. There's also a more info section where you can add links. They don't give you a lot of flexibility here. You can add in an Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Wikipedia, and SoundBetter link. You can't do any custom links, unfortunately. And then finally, you are able to add in a biography. And also, one thing to note with the biography is you could actually add links in here as well. You type in an @ and you can paste a link to any artist, album, playlist, or track. And then one thing I wanted to mention before wrapping this video up is that, as you can see from any of these tabs, if you look at the bottom right corner, there is one thing that is persistent, and it is this question mark, this black little question mark here. And if you click this, it'll actually open up the Spotify for Artists FAQ section. And one cool thing about this is it's a pretty useful FAQ question. You can find some common answers to things that you need, but at the bottom of it, you can see you can't find what you're looking for. You can actually contact Spotify and fill out this form, send your query over to Spotify, and honestly, they're actually super duper responsive and helpful. What I noticed, particularly if something happens where if your song gets sent to the wrong artist profile, if you contact Spotify directly about that, they'll fix it incredibly fast. But if you do it in the back end of, say, DistroKid and try to reach out to your distributor, I find it takes way longer for them, like 2 to 3 weeks, where Spotify can fix it in just a couple of days. So, useful tip for sure. Definitely try to use the FAQ when you can. But if you need to contact them, they're actually super duper responsive and awesome. Like, I'm surprised, to be honest, but they are great. And then last thing I wanted to mention is that this article that I mentioned at the top of the video, if you want to check it out, there's also some more information on Spotify playlist submissions on how you can really do that, as well as tips on how to do it, some tips on if your Spotify for Artists stats is not updating, some information on how to do that, some more information on the Spotify Artist FAQ, as well as a bit more information that I mentioned that I have a video for, but you can also check it out in this article as well, of how to actually create a Spotify Artist account, the various ways that you can do that, as well as a breakdown of what Spotify for Artists can't do and how you can get around that, and some related questions. So it's a pretty deep article that goes a little bit more in depth, and it's just a different way to consume the information if you want to read it. So cool. With that said, hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Otherwise, hopefully you have a better time navigating the Spotify for Artists dashboard. Good luck on your next release, and I will see you in the next video, my friend. Have a good one.